Good day everyone, this is Chinky Beributa, BSN Trip 2A. Indigenous people. Indigenous people are distinct social and cultural groups that share collective ancestral ties to the lands and natural resources where they live, occupy, or from the which they had been displaced. According to World Bank Organization, there are an estimated 476 million indigenous peoples worldwide. Although they make up just 6% of the global population, they account for about 19% of the extreme poor. Indigenous people live in every region of the world, but about 70% live in Asia and the Pacific, followed by 16.3% in Africa, 11.5% in Latin America and Caribbean, 1.6% in North America, and 0.1% in the Europe and Central Asia. There are indigenous people in the Philippines. According to International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs, there are Igorot, Zalumad, and Zamangyan. The Philippines is a culturally diverse country with an estimated 14 to 17 million indigenous people belonging to ethno-linguistic group. They are mainly concentrated in Northern Luzon, Cordillera Administrative Region, 33%, and Mindanao 61%, with some groups in Visayas area. In light of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, the worsening human rights situation in the country, the general outlook for coming year is bleak. Indigenous people are bracing themselves for more difficult days. The main problems that indigenous people face are from large-scale mining that digs up their land, in the construction of large-scale dams that floods their land, in the widespread logging that deforests their land, or in the creation of nature reserves on agriculture that says them ejected from or restricted in access to. Indigenous people often rank highest for prison inmates, illiteracy, and unemployment. Globally, they suffer higher rates of poverty, landlessness, malnutrition, and internal displacement. Many of the once-and ethno-linguistic indigenous groups in the Philippines experience discrimination, degradation of resource bases, and armed conflict. IP communities generally located in distinct ancestral territories have high rates of unemployment, underemployment, and illiteracy. Indigenous communities have been subjected to years of colonialism, historical trauma, and system racism. Today, various disparities continue to subside within healthcare, education, children's services, and more than that, affect the well-being of indigenous people and their communities. Indigenous people often lack formal recognition over their land territories, and natural resources are often lost to receive public investment in basic services and infrastructure, and face multiple barriers to participate fully in the formal economy, enjoy access to justice, and participate in political process and decision making. The legacy of inequality and exclusion has made indigenous people more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and natural hazards, including to disease outbreaks such as COVID-19. Much of the land occupied by indigenous people is under customary ownership, yet many governments recognize only a fraction of this land as formally or legally belonging to indigenous people. The program that an aid to the IP's ICCS lives in the present is the IP Aid program, or should I say, Indigenous People Education. The Department of Education is serving 2.529 million IP learners in 42,176 public schools around the Philippines. In the first decade of Indigenous People Education Program, according to the agency Indigenous People Education Office, through DepEd Order 62/2011, or the National Indigenous People Education Policy Framework, which was formulated after several consultation sessions with IP leaders and the elders. The department officially commenced the institutionalization of the IP education program in 2011. IP-8 program is developed in response to the right of indigenous communities and indigenous learners to an education that is responsive to their context, to respect their identities and its value and promote their knowledge system and their competencies and the value that are important to them and of course the other parts of their heritage.